Good evening, everybody. Firstly, this is our last talk before we break for summer, and it's great that we've kept it going right through the last 12 months. It seems an age ago when with COVID we couldn't touch, talk, or meet anybody. So from that point of view, it's absolutely wonderful that, in a sense, our talks are falling by the wayside naturally. I personally am indebted to Orla, to Lucy Taylor, and to Claude Cahill for all the work the Live project have done, and to all our speakers. And indeed, this evening, as ever, we have John Flannery talking about astronomy, and we have Kate McAney talking about bats. And personally, I hadn't realized just how important they were to each other, or more specifically, how important bats are to astronomers. And Kate will explain why. But without further ado, having thanked everybody, and with the promise that we're going to do something in September for everybody who had attended these talks, and more of that later. Over to you, John.
Thanks very much, Steve. Welcome, everyone. And I'd like to echo Steve's comments in thanking Lucy, Claude, and Orla. They've done Trojan work in keeping the webinars going and putting up posts about the events and compiling the notes afterwards. And I met some people in early March when there was a Dark Sky festival in the Ballinskelligs and Derrynane area and Carrisalveen, and hopefully we might see that continue in future years as well. But speaking of dark skies, the summer months are not really, well, you kind of could say they're not conducive to astronomy because of the longer evenings and the shorter nights. And certainly like as I was saying to the others earlier, this is not a photograph from tonight, but I just thought it nicely captured the kind of lazy summer evenings that we hope to have over the next few months. But certainly one thing that astronomers are looking forward to this month is a gathering of the planets in the morning sky. Already there's been various news items online about it, and it's an event that last occurred maybe about 16 years ago, where all the naked eye planets, or the so-called classical planets, were gathered together, and you could see them in one sweep. In this particular case, it's the tightest grouping of the naked eye planets in about 100 years. And the unusual aspect to it is that they're arranged across the sky in order of their increasing distance from the sun. So this particular diagram, quite small, but you'd be able to replicate it on any app such as Stellarium, which I used for this, shows the sky on the morning of June 27th with Mercury quite low in the northeast. Then you have Venus in Taurus, Mars, Jupiter, and then a ways to the right, going south-southeast, is the planet Saturn. You also have the planets Uranus and Neptune up at the same time, and they could be caught in binoculars. In fact, about 2 years ago, a couple of us from Gormanstown Beach in North Dublin managed to see all the planets in the solar system in one sweep of the sky just before sunrise. Now, to tell the truth, we had to use a photograph to confirm Mercury, and that was because it was a bit dimmer 2 years ago, and it will be at the same for the same arrangement towards the end of June. So it is a good opportunity. The moon on the morning of the 27th of June will help you find Mercury, because Mercury lies directly below it. So fingers crossed the sky is clear. The previous morning, the moon will be closer to Venus. So this arrangement will happen for a few days. So if the 27th is cloudy, like I know it's an early rise, but it's a unique opportunity to see those all the planets, and you can even just look down at your feet and you've caught Earth to make up all 8. But certainly do set the alarm clock, try and get out and see this unique opportunity to catch all the worlds in our solar system. In fact, earlier today, I was kind of speculating that someday in the far future, humans will stand on other worlds, and from those alien worlds, maybe around an alien star, they'll look up at that sky and see all the planets in one sweep of that particular solar system. We know of well over 3,000 stars with extrasolar planets. So it's only science fiction now, but very often science fiction has a habit of becoming science fact. And our future descendants potentially will see a scene somewhat like this, except it will be a completely different solar system. So that's the beauty of astronomy. You can let your imagination soar a bit when you see these things. In mid-July, the planet Venus, the planets are confined to a kind of narrow strip of sky, which we tend to call the zodiac, but they kind of straggle along a band called the ecliptic, which is the plane of the solar system projected onto the sky. So that's why you see the planets in the various zodiacal constellations over the course of the year. And in July, Venus will have traveled through Taurus, but reaches a particular star in Taurus which is catalogued as Zeta Tauri. It marks one of the horns of the charging bull. But Venus will lie within a full moon diameter of the site of a supernova explosion that was witnessed by Chinese astronomers in mid-July 1054. And I think it's a great opportunity if you're up that morning to go out and imagine or kind of dwell on the site, and that this was the same site that greeted the Chinese astronomers nearly a millennium ago. Venus will be slightly dimmer than the maximum brightness the supernova reached. If the supernova's maximum brightness was about as bright as Venus normally gets, but in July this year, Venus won't quite be at maximum brightness, but it will be very close to that particular site. And what we see there today is an expanding shell of debris from the explosion, literally a star that ripped itself apart and is scattering material into the interstellar medium, mixing with other clouds of gas and dust to form the next generation of stars and solar systems, and even people and plants and fauna. So it's how our own solar system came to be. I often think of the words of Lawrence Krauss, the American astronomer, who speculated that if you take a look at your left hand and take a look at your right hand, the elements making up your left hand came from one star, and potentially the elements in your right hand came from another. Again, it's letting your imagination think of the whole, how much we're connected with the universe, and that we really are made of stardust. The Crab Nebula is visible in a small telescope, but it's generally best viewed during the winter months when it's quite well placed in the evening sky. But certainly, if you go out on the morning of July 13th, think back to that scene in 1054. the supernova was visible for a few months in daylight and remained visible above naked eye visibility for about 2 years afterwards before it faded from view. The site of the explosion wasn't rediscovered until the 18th century when an English astronomer stumbled across a faint glow of light marking the patch of sky where the debris cloud is. And this is a modern photograph showing it in detail. At the heart of the nebula is an object about 10 kilometers across, spinning 33 times a second. It's called a pulsar. And the beam of light sweeps across our line of sight from Earth once every 1/33 of a second. So it's quite rapidly spinning, rather like a lighthouse beam. And the pulsars are kind of considered the most accurate clocks in the universe because they only lose a second every few billion years. So they are extremely accurate, and they have been used to regulate clocks on Earth. The same day as Venus appears supernova-like, you have not just the biggest full moon of the year, but the closest moon at any point in 2022. And this was the supermoon rising over Killiney in May of last year. And if the sky is clear that evening, do find a clear southeastern horizon to spy the moon coming up. And as you can see there, it takes on this lovely kind of golden bronze color because of its low altitude. And it's also not perfectly circular. It's not a perfect sphere. It's very compressed because, again, due to the low altitude and the varying temperature differences of our atmosphere, showing the different air densities give that compressed look to the moon. And in fact, it can appear quite dramatic just as it pokes over the horizon. Sometimes, as with the sun, you can see a counter moon, almost like a mirror image of the top of the moon appearing to stay attached to the bottom of the moon as it's rising, and then it just breaks away and sinks below the horizon while the moon proper continues to rise higher and higher. When we get into August, the planets are beginning to get better placed in our night sky. They're not all morning objects anymore. The likes of Jupiter and Saturn are starting to become visible before midnight. Mars also will become visible maybe around 1 or 2 a.m. by August. But on the night of August 1st, it will appear quite close to the planet Uranus. And this was about a year and a half ago. In January 24th, 2021, Uranus and Mars were very close to each other again. And this is a photo I just took from the back garden with a Canon 700D fitted with the standard 18 to 55 millimeter kit lens. And then I just blew it up a little on the computer. And you can see Uranus. Okay, it's a tiny dot, but it's a lovely pea green color, which is very obviously visible or very obvious to the eye when you look at it in binoculars. And then Mars has that orange tint to it due to the desert-like conditions that are on the surface of the planet. And it was interesting, that photo was 35 years to the day after the Voyager 2 spacecraft gave us our first close-up of the planet Uranus. And recently, in the decadal survey issued by the United States, the groups of astronomers and scientists in the United States, a mission to Uranus is high priority. It won't launch until about the year 2032, and then won't reach the planet Uranus until maybe the year 2040. But it will go into orbit around Uranus and study its moon system. Voyager only gave us a brief view of the planet because it was passing it by. It wasn't going into orbit around it. The mission at the time was overshadowed, though, by the Challenger disaster, which occurred 4 days later on January 28th, 1986, and saw the loss of 7 astronauts. I mentioned Jupiter and Saturn. They're morning sky objects presently, but I saw Jupiter about just a little after 3:30 on Tuesday morning, because I got up to watch for the potential outburst of the tall Hercules meteor shower. And I was sitting out in the back garden, and for about an hour and a half, and I saw a grand total of 1 tall Hercules. So but it was a really dramatic one, a beautiful, slow, orange-colored trail with a yellowish head to it. And I wanted to shout out, "Wow, look at that!" And unfortunately, I couldn't, because it was the wee hours in the morning, and it would have probably woken up the neighborhood. But certainly, it was lovely to see Jupiter peering over the hedges at that stage. And it will arise earlier and earlier as the months go on, 2 hours earlier for every month that elapses. And this was the view on the night of the Perseid meteor shower maximum last year. Jupiter is the bright object, and then Saturn, a little to the right, is the brightest of those other fainter points of light. And you can see how much Jupiter has moved on from its encounter with Saturn back on the winter solstice 2020. On December 21st, 2020, the 2 objects were the closest they were to be for 400 years, and they could both be seen in the same telescope field of view. But Jupiter moves about the diameter of the full moon every 6 days, or sorry, every 5 days. So it's a bit of a speedster compared to the plodding nature of Saturn. Jupiter takes 12 years to go around the sun. So from our perspective on the sky, it visits a constellation every year, a constellation of the zodiac every year. So each of the 12 zodiacal constellations are visited once a year, and then Jupiter the following year moves into the next one. Saturn is more of a plodder. It takes 29.5 years to go around the sun. So it spends a couple of years in each constellation and slowly traverses them over that time. If you have a telescope, you'll see the rings are not as wide open as they were a few years ago, because Saturn's orbit is tilted with respect to Earth's, and every 15 years or so we pass through the ring plane of Saturn, and the rings appear edge on, and in smaller instruments they almost disappear. Some people liken it to seeing a ball of wool skewered by a knitting needle. And certainly it's quite a dramatic sight. In fact, it can sometimes throw beginning people that have bought a telescope for the first time expecting to see the rings of Saturn in 2025 will be a bit disappointed. They won't. The rings are like tens of thousands of kilometers wide, but they're only about 100 meters thick. So they are extremely narrow with respect to their width. I guess it's rather like looking edge on a sheet of A4 paper, as against looking at it from a more oblique angle. And but definitely you'll rapidly see the rings beginning to narrow next year and the year after, and then in 2025 they'll be edge on for a short period of time until they start to widen out again. Just a DSLR and a standard lens. In this case, the 50mm Nifty 50 was enough to capture Jupiter and its major moons. I took the picture in twilight because the glare of Jupiter doesn't overpower the moons like it would if the sky was fully dark. When it's in twilight, it suppresses the glare a little from Jupiter, so the moons kind of stand out. And there's a number of apps out there, or Stellarium will show the positions of the moons from night to night, and you can see them in a pair of binoculars quite easily as they change position. It's a site that Galileo astounded Galileo, and was one of the ways he began to form ideas about the true nature of the universe, and fundamentally changed our outlook of the world around us forever. The first sighting I know of Noctilucent Clouds from Ireland was just in the early hours of this morning. Leah Burgess down in Tankardstown in Waterford managed to see these rare high atmosphere clouds and got a number of photographs, and she tweeted them. And a number of observers in the UK also managed to photograph them. Noctilucent clouds are the highest altitude clouds we know of. They occur about 80 to 83 kilometers in altitude in the mesosphere, where the temperatures plummet to about minus 123, 125 degrees Celsius. They tend to form around nuclei, which is basically meteor-like dust. Like there's a constant kind of rain of particles falling into Earth's atmosphere, very, very fine meteorite dust. And these act as the nuclei for ice crystals to start forming around them. But the clouds are visible because they're illuminated by the sun just below the horizon, whereas lower down clouds, as it shows here from a picture I got near home here in Dublin, it shows lower down ordinary clouds in silhouette against the brighter Noctilucent clouds. And they have a cirrus-like structure to them, but the display, because there's high winds, even in that very tenuous region of the upper atmosphere, the very rarefied region of the upper atmosphere, the clouds are kind of buffeted by those winds, and the display can change over a period of minutes, and time-lapse photography can nicely capture a change in display. They occur roughly from the end of May to mid-July or thereabouts, and definitely a good website, or well, actually a good, if you're on Twitter, a good account to follow is NLC Alerts, and that will have posts from various observers when displays are seen. There's a number of cameras. There's a group of cameras scattered around different parts of Germany that monitor the sky during the summer months for displays, and they're often worth checking. And I can send Orla the links to those where you can kind of check them every so often, or spaceweather.com. Speaking of meteors, Perseid meteor shower is mid-August every year, August 12th. Unfortunately, this year it's going to be badly affected by the full moon on the same night. The moon, I guess you could call it a form of light pollution in its own right, and will wash out the brighter meteors So, or to wash out the fainter meteors, so only the brighter ones will be seen. Again, after hundreds of photographs last year, I managed to catch one meteor. This is a Perseid that had zipped across the plough and ended very near Arcturus. And I got that picture from down there, Kinnegad, where skies were reasonably okay but last year, but there was a certain amount of light pollution around. And lastly, from a really dark site, the Milky Way is always very dramatic. And this time, coming into the summer months is the best time of year to see it, especially August, September, when it's arching right overhead. Down there, the horizon is towards the center of the galaxy, and then the sweep takes you up through Aquila, Cygnus, and on into Perseus and Cassiopeia. And it's just from a dark site, the Milky Way is truly extraordinary to scan, even with just binoculars, or just to sit back in a deck chair and admire the dramatic sky. All those streaks of light are satellites that pass through the field of view, and there's certainly a proliferation of satellites in the sky. Over the last couple of years, I've really noticed an increase in the number of satellites visible, and observers are taking 20-second photographs and counting 16, 18, 20 or more streaks of satellites. So they're becoming a new form of pollution of the sky, robbing us, I guess, of a certain heritage that we once had. And I'll wrap it up at that. Thanks very much, everyone, and have a great summer.
John, thank you very much. As ever, great insight into what's up there and what's coming at us. A couple of thoughts on your talk. One was, I know car manufacturers these days are very good at talking about the length of warranty they give, but none of them are giving you a 46-year warranty on something that's traveled 14 billion miles without a service. And Voyager is in that category. It's quite extraordinary that if you say to anybody, take any piece of equipment from 46 years ago and imagine it's still in use, it's pretty incredible. Two things before we go to Kate. Two items. One, the Skellig Star Party, a date for your diary, August the 19th to the 21st. This is a group of astronomers who come down from various astronomy clubs in Ireland and voluntarily bring more astronomy equipment than you'll normally see together in any one place, and are absolutely superb at sharing their knowledge, and it really is an enjoyable weekend, totally volunteer effort, and we really appreciate the work they do. So that's August the 19th to the 21st, and they've been very lucky weather-wise over the last years. Obviously with COVID, we had nothing for 2 years. And the other thing that I want to talk about is something that we're going to do in September and invite everybody who has been participating in these talks to, but we come back to that at the end. Can I ask Kate McAney to talk to you about the wonderful creatures, the bat? Kate, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to share my screen now. Hopefully, it will appear soon. My internet is behaving itself.
Kate, we can see it it's not in presenter mode, but we can see, oh yeah, there it is.
Yeah,
Got
just
it now.
yeah, just give it a little bit of time. Yeah, great stuff. Everything okay? You can hear me all right?
Yeah, fantastic.
Great, thanks very much. I'm very, very grateful to the Kerry International Dark Sky Reserve for inviting me to speak tonight on your final online event. I feel actually really privileged because I've listened in to some of the previous presentations, and I'm just a huge fan now of John. He's just fantastic. So I'm very glad to have been invited. And the reason the invitation came about was that I approached the reserve about their willingness to become involved in a 5-year species action plan that I'm currently writing with Dr. Ferdy Marnell of National Parks and Wildlife Service for the Lesser Horseshoe Bat. And the importance of dark skies, I hope you'll realise as we go through the presentation, but I really wanted to have an action in the Lesser Horseshoe Action Plan, referring to the existence of dark skies, and was hoping that we'd be able to explore some opportunities to work together in the future. And I'm delighted that you came back and said, yes, we want to be a partner. So I look forward to that. And Orla then, as I said, sent me on links to the previous presentations, and I was struck by how much those of us who watch bats at night and those of you who watch the night skies have in common. We're all plagued by insects that are attracted to us as we're trying to stay still, and also we need to carry a bit of warm clothing with us because, as you know, no matter how warm it's been during the day, temperatures can get quite cold after sunset. But the one thing I think that bat workers have maybe a little advantage over you is that because we're active throughout the night, because our animals are active throughout the night, those late appearing stars and planets that might cause you to have to set your alarm clock or maybe not bother to get up to see are something that we can see because we're out there, providing we know what we're looking at, of course. The dark skies are important for all of the Irish bats, but particularly so for the Lesser Horseshoe Bat. And it's one of our smallest bats. It tips the scales at the same weight as a €2 coin. So we're looking at maybe 5 to 6 grams. It's instantly recognizable by a fleshy, almost circular disc of skin around the nostrils. In summer, it seeks out old, unoccupied buildings in rural landscapes in which the females generally give birth to their young there. They just have one pup in the summer. In winter then, the Lesser Horseshoes seek generally underground sites to hibernate. It always flies directly into its roosts. So unlike the other Irish bats that can land and crawl and avail of many types of roosts, the Lesser Horseshoe Bat is like a swallow. It needs to fly directly into a roost where it then hangs upside down. So that immediately limits the number of places that are available to it. And it always hangs free, which means that we're able to see it, so it is well monitored. And it will wrap its wings around its body to a greater or lesser degree, whereas other bats, they'll keep the wings down at the side of the body. Horseshoe bats feed in broadleaf woodland, well-wooded river banks, hedgerows, and grazed pasture. The Vincent Wildlife Trust, the trust I work for, the NGO I work for, became involved in a practical sense with Lesser Horseshoe conservation back in the late 1990s, when we began to acquire some of the important old buildings that these bats were using because they were at risk of being lost through deterioration. And last summer, we counted over 3,500 adult Lesser Horseshoe bats emerging from our buildings, and we call them reserves as well. So the map here, all the little flags, indicate where our reserves are. So we have 2 in Mayo, 1 just on the border of Galway and Clare, 1 in Clare, and swoop down to South Kerry where we have 8. And that's because this area is definitely a stronghold for the species. And it's a combination of factors. There is an extensive woodland in this part of the county. You've got well-vegetated river and water systems, good connectivity, good hedgerows, don't have very many large urban areas. So we're coming back to the influence of artificial light. And has been in the past a lot of old buildings that the species can use. As well as needing fine old buildings in which to rear their young in summer, this species needs a lot of other little buildings to tuck into at different times of the year and at different times of the night. So having those small little buildings dotted around a mosaic landscape is really important for it. These are photographs of one of our Kerry reserves, and it's the one probably nearest Skellig's. It's near Waterfall. And it was brought to our attention in 2006 by National Parks and Wildlife Service when there's about 100 bats using it. You might just be able to see that there is a building tucked in behind all this vegetation. And we acquired the building and carried out major restoration, which generally involved re-roofing it with natural slate and putting up protective barriers to prevent predators getting in and keeping the building dark and warm for the bats. And our volunteer, Nora, counts out the adult bats here for us every summer during the monitoring program, which runs from the end of May to the beginning of July, when we get an idea of the population. And she counted out 379 adult bats in July of last year, 2020-21. But we counted more than that, hibernating in the building in February of this year. And this is very much a Kerry phenomenon because of the generally milder winters that you have in Kerry. The bats don't necessarily have to go underground for hibernation. They can move from the warm attic space where the females have been during the summer, rearing their young. They simply, as the temperatures decline, they simply fly down the staircases and can hibernate on the ground floor because the temperature conditions are suitable at that time. Anything from 6 to 7 to 8 degrees centigrade in normally mild winters, that is. Just to go back to the previous slide, if you can see some of the exits here where we have them grilled. So we sit outside this time of year to count them emerging, and watching lesser horseshoe bats emerge is both a fantastic experience, but also a highly frustrating one, because like other bats, they don't fly out straight away and fly off. They pop out and then they go back in again, and they pop out and then they might fly off a little bit and then they fly back in again. And what they're doing is they are sampling the light intensity in the vicinity of the building. And they're doing this because they are making sure that they're going to fly away from the building when it's dark enough, so that means that they're safe from predators. They fly slowly, and although their echolocation is very good for hunting insects in complete darkness in woodland, it doesn't travel far from the animal. And so they can't detect a predator as it's approaching. So their only way of avoiding being predated on the wing when they're out is to fly in dim and dark conditions and to stick close to a linear feature such as a hedgerow, or in this part of the country up in Galway and Mayo, we have stone walls. Once the bat has emerged and moving through the landscape, as I've said, they do need linear features to fly along, and that's purely for predator protection. They avoid illuminated areas. They are the most photophobic species, Irish species, bat species we have. There've been experiments done on different light levels, and as soon as you start increasing the light level, they will move off from an area, or they'll even abandon a building. They avoid intensely farmed land. They avoid open spaces at high light levels. We've only got 13,000 of them, and they're only found in 6 Western counties. I like to call them the bat of the wild Atlantic Way, because we find them in Mayo, Galway, Clare, Limerick, Cork and Kerry. But they are unevenly distributed throughout those counties, as we'll see shortly. Because of its special ecological needs and so many areas it avoids in order to function well, it has additional protection under the Habitats Directive. So it's an Annex 2 species under the Habitats Directive. It's the only Irish bat species that has that. And therefore, special areas of conservation need to be set up to help it protect it. So its maternity roosts and its hibernation sites dotted around the country, the 6 counties, 41 of these are special areas of conservation. So to highlight just how responsive it is to light intensity, this is a graph taken from research conducted by a colleague of mine, Henry Schofield, in the 1990s. And the vertical axis shows the height of flight, so the height at which the bats were flying in meters. And the horizontal axis shows light level measured in lux. And we're looking at a gap in a hedgerow of just 5 meters. So if we look at the arrows going from right to left, at a lux level of 20, which I believe, having looked around, is about the light you'd get coming from a main road, the bats are flying, but they're flying very low. They're just 0.5 meter to 1 meter up off the ground in order to avoid detection. Then as we move to lower light levels, so 4, a level of 4, lux level of 4, which would be equivalent to maybe the lighting around a minor road, they're beginning to get a little bit more brave, and they're flying above a meter and going up to 1.5 meters. And then as the light level dips below 1 and below again that, they are beginning to feel more confident about flying. And so at much lower light levels, they will be confident enough to fly at 4 to 5 meters height, which is generally where you'd expect them to find their food, in amongst the branches of the woodland and the edges along the rivers that they're flying along. So the light intensity, they're so tuned into that. And that's why dark skies are such a challenge to them, and the spread of urbanization. There's lots of factors influencing the conservation status of the Lesser Horseshoe Bat at the moment. Over the years, they have lost access to a lot of old buildings because they've deteriorated beyond even the bats using them, or else they've been renovated. We've had major changes in areas of landscape. So hedgerows have been removed, woodland has been cleared. We have spread of urbanization. So there are many factors that are kind of working against the species to survive. And research has now shown that the population of Lesser Horseshoe Bats is now beginning to be fragmented, and they're becoming differentiated into subpopulations genetically, which is quite a serious challenge for a population of just 13,000 confined into 6 counties. So research was carried out by Serena Dool, and she discovered by looking at the DNA of bats from the north of their range, so Mayo and Galway, and bats throughout their range, but she found that they were genetically differentiated in the north and in the south. So there were 2 subpopulations. So the bats in the north could be recognized genetically from those in the south, from those in Kerry. So the northern population comprised Mayo, Galway, Clare, Limerick, and then we had the stronghold down in the south, which was Kerry and Cork. But she had a feeling that maybe there was more than that going on, and that was proven then with further research by Andrew Harrington, where he showed there were in fact a 3rd subpopulation. So what we have is we have a northern subpopulation, we now have a central one comprising Clare and Limerick, and South Galway, Clare and Limerick, and then we still have the ones in the south. But Andrew feels that there's more going on again, that maybe there's more differentiation. And I'm hoping that this slide, this map will summarize what I've been saying. So the red dots represent roost sites for the Lesser Horseshoe Bat. And if we look at up in the north, up in Mayo and North Galway, that's our northern subpopulation. We then move into the centre, which is South Galway, Clare and Limerick. And then we move down into the south, which is Kerry and West Cork. But Andrew feels that possibly the North Galway Lesser Horseshoe colonies are drifting genetically apart from those in South Galway. And those in Limerick are now drifting apart genetically from those in Clare. And it's no coincidence that when we look at a map that you'll all be familiar with, which is the light pollution, we have big beams of artificial light coming out in Galway city. And we have, again, very, very illuminated urban areas, Ennis, Shannon, but also Limerick. So this is why we have reached out to the Dark Skies in Ireland to see if there's ways in the future that we will be able to maybe improve the situation and maybe take action together, which would benefit both your night viewing of the skies and also this really important little species, the Lesser Horseshoe. I said that I was very lucky in that I went out on a dark sky safari in Ballycroy in March with Georgie McMillan, and I discovered that you can print off these maps to show you what to look out for each month. And John obviously has been doing that all year now for yourselves. So I thought that it might be a good idea if I added in a few things happening on the bat front that you can think of as well. So bat highlights, and apologies to John if I haven't reported correctly from watching your videos, but I'm hoping that in June, when you're looking at dazzling Venus, I think is how you described it, that you will think about the young bats that are coming on the wing. There is a lot of nighttime bat activity because the females are suckling their young, then they're coming out, they're feeding themselves at dusk, they're popping back in again to suckle their pup for another short while, popping out again to feed themselves. So there's a lot of bat activity. So but bear that in mind when you're out in June, in this month. Then in July, when the summer triangle is there for in the night sky, the young are taken to the wing. The young bats are taken to the wing. So it's a very challenging time for them. But again, there's going to be quite a bit of bat activity as you're out and about. And then when it comes into August, where you're looking up for the meteor shower, the attention of bats turn to mating. And from August through September and October, and even throughout the winter for some of the species, the males and females get together, mating takes place, but then the females don't become pregnant until the following spring when there's food available again. So I just thought it would be an idea to just think about the bats when you're out watching the skies. And I'm going to finish off here by playing a short recording of what a lesser horseshoe sounds like when it's emerging. And scooting around the landscape. And these are just some links to further information. There's an excellent guidance document, number 8 in a series of publications by Eurobats, which is an umbrella group for the conservation of bats. And they have an excellent one on lighting guidelines for bats. And that's our own website for Vincent Wildlife Trust in Ireland. Lots of information on bats, on Bat Conservation Ireland, which is the umbrella group for bat conservation. And we ventured into the virtual world 2 years ago when COVID came along. We were invited to do a virtual bat walk for Limerick City and County Council. They were European Greenleaf City then, but unfortunately, many of their outdoor events had to be cancelled because of COVID. So they asked us, would we put together a virtual bat walk? And if you go on YouTube and type in Limerick European Greenleaf City, you'll be able to go on a virtual bat walk for encounter all species. But for the moment, hopefully you'll be able to. I always like to let the lesser horseshoe have the last word. So this is what it sounds like through a bat detector. And that's Mike. Thank you very much.
That was fantastic, Kate. Thank you. My gosh, that was so interesting.
You're welcome.
I've taken down loads of little notes.
Yes, indeed. Kate, thank you. And you mentioned the property in Waterville. I worked on it for a while up in Glencar and was aware through the park ranger up there that there was some activity, some significant activity in one of the old buildings. So in fact, a hotel that was in operation, I think, at the time. But it's fascinating, and thank you so much. And for those of us who are out at night, it's fascinating to have a little bit more understanding of what's going on. If you're traveling to Kerry at any stage, please do let us know. we'd love to meet up. Folks, we're finishing up for the summer. As I say, thank you to Orla, thank you to Clodagh, to Lucy, to John, of course, and Kate. We are planning something for everyone in the audience who was registered for these talks. What we're going to do is have a free dark sky viewing night in a couple of locations on the 16th and 17th of September. So we'll notify everybody who's on the list of participants in the talks about a bit more detail. Nothing too formal, basically hoping for good weather, and we will be out showing people what's in the night sky. And perhaps, Kate, hearing about bats, if you could make it down that weekend.
I'd love to. I really would. I think I would, yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Okay, folks. Orla, have you any housekeeping before we finish?
There's just one or two little questions. Some of them have been answered already in the chat. I've been popping in lots of little links in the chat as well, and what I'll do is I'll email them out to everybody, so don't worry if you didn't catch them. There was a question you answered already about the Dark Sky Reserve and where is it in relation to locations in Park Nasilla Hotel. Both on our website and on Steve's website, there's information about exactly where the Dark Sky Reserve spreads to. We have some maps and things, so I'll put them in an email, and you can see it actually covers quite a large area. We're very, very lucky to have the Kerry Dark Sky Reserve and the area that it actually covers. Any more little questions? Oh, just about one for you, Kate. Would there be any likelihood of roosts not yet detected in other counties?
Oh, I think so. Yeah, I hope so. I sincerely hope so. I think the reason we know so much about Kerry is because both National Parks and Wildlife Service have done a lot of survey work there, but we also did a lot of survey work. Conor Kelleher was fantastic. He surveyed Kerry and parts of West Cork for us in the late 1990s and early 2000s and found hundreds of old buildings. But I just don't think the same number are to be found in other areas because there's just been a lot more development, and they're closer to larger cities as well. So the little buildings get, they get absorbed by development very quickly.
They do, yeah. And just one more question for you. Can bats be relocated to suitable buildings? Would they be able to settle? Or is that like you mentioned that sometimes if they abandon buildings, if they get too much light, so is it a case of they'd actually abandon a building rather than you could move them?
Yeah, they'll choose to go. Lesser horseshoes are particularly sensitive to disturbance and don't react well to being handled even for a short period of time. So what we have done, our successes have been because we have renovated the buildings that they were still using, or we built or renovated a building close to where they were, so they had knowledge of the landscape beforehand. But it isn't, I wish to God we could, swoop them up, scoop them up and put them into a building, but they would just freak out, or else they would all just fly back or fly away. So no, it's knowing where they are and providing them with the conditions that they need within that area.
Okay, interesting. It's not like bees, the way people will try and catch a wild swarm of bees or something.
No, they're very complicated. They've got a very complicated social network, and they can live for such a long time, and they're faithful to their sites. So in our buildings, we could have great grandmothers, mothers, grandmothers, so whole generations. They can live for quite a long time. So no, it's really keeping what we have for them or providing what we know they need in the right place.
Fantastic. And just
turning off the lights.
Yeah. On a final note, do you want to just mention the report you have coming out? I know we were kind of waiting to see if it would be out by today, but would you like to give it a little plug anyway?
Yeah, well, it's the first species action plan for the Lesser Horseshoe Bat, and as I've been working with on it with Dr. Ferdy Marnell, and it will be hopefully published soon, but it touches on all aspects of its conservation. So access to roost sites, access to suitable areas for foraging, access to hibernation sites, and also obviously access to dark skies and trying to curb urbanization. So there's a lot of information in there about the species itself, a lot more than I could cover this evening. But the main part of it really is there's a chapter there on actions, and that's really what we want to partner with people and explore ways of funding that we can put some of those actions into play in the next couple of years. So we view it as this is the first action plan, and then there'll be a second one, hopefully, and a third one, because we've only got 13,000 animals, and things are going in the wrong direction for it. We know that from the recent conservation assessment. So we have to act now before it's too late.
And I'd say some of those action plans probably coincide quite a lot with some of the action plans for dark sky reserves as well, in terms of light pollution. And
I would hope so. Yeah. So
it's really interesting
on that. Yeah.
I think we've managed to catch all the questions there. So I don't know, John, have you got any final words?
No, and I thought that was fabulous, Kate. The comparison of the night sky over the summer, and it was lovely to link that together.
Yeah.
Like it really.
Well, I've been so lucky over the years that I've been out, at night, and I know the summer skies that I'm now learning are not that, are not always the best. But maybe it's just because, you have to be out so late maybe to see what's going on. But yes, I've had some fantastic nights where I haven't known what I've been looking at because I'm only just learning now. But I would see, meteor showers and I would see the sky, the stars, and it is it's just such an honor to be out and a pleasure to be out there and to see them.
And I noticed that, like, your map of the sites for the bats kind of reminded me. I was at a talk at the Eco Village in Jordan a few weeks ago, and one of the talks was about curlews, and the range where curlews are found very closely maps or mirrors where the bat, like where you had the flags on the map. And now the curlews have a slightly broader range, but it was just interesting that it's almost like all the under threat species have shrunk. The areas they're found in have shrunk significantly, due to urbanization, as you said, and avoiding human activity. So it's
okay, folks. We will wrap it up for the summer. Sounds good. School's out.
I think wrap up is the operative word tonight.
Indeed, yeah. Well, certainly no midgies tonight here. That's for sure. It's wet and windy. We'll put some more detail up about the 16th and 17th of September, and look forward to seeing everybody in the flesh on this Friday or Saturday of that weekend. And
we have to dress as a planet, do we?
No, you'll be all right. Just wrap up warm is what I always say. It's amazing how cold it can get.
I got folks, for looking like Peg Sayers the last time.
Pardon?
I wrapped up so much.
All right, folks.
Thank you.
Take care and all the very best.
See you all soon.
Cheers.
Have a good summer. Bye.